The man on the phone had a careful voice, the kind of careful that people use when they're about to deliver news they didn't cause, but know will hurt. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "this is Raymond Okafor. I'm a real estate attorney here in Gulf Shores. I represent the Harmon family. They've entered into a purchase agreement for a property on Pelican Crest Lane." He paused. "I'm calling because there are some discrepancies in the title chain I need to clarify before we proceed to closing." It was 4:17 in the afternoon on a Thursday in October. I was standing in my kitchen in Montgomery, still wearing the apron I'd had on since noon, a pot of butter beans simmering on the stove behind me. The light through the window was that flat gold light that October makes, the kind that looks like the end of something. "What property on Pelican Crest Lane?" I said. Another pause, longer this time. "The property at 214 Pelican Crest Lane, Gulf Shores, Alabama," he said. "A 3-bedroom, 2-bath beach cottage, currently listed in the name of Whitfield Family Trust, but the seller identified on the purchase agreement is—" I heard him shuffle papers. "Marcus Jerome Whitfield." I turned off the stove. "Mr. Okafor," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I want you to know that. It didn't shake because I have been 67 years old for 11 months now, and in that time, I have learned something about what shock feels like when it sits inside your chest instead of coming out your mouth. Are you telling me that my son has signed a purchase agreement to sell my beach house? Mrs. Whitfield." He chose his next words the way you choose where to step in a field you're not sure about. "The seller on the contract presented himself as having authority to sell. There was documentation. A power of attorney." I pulled out the chair at my kitchen table. I sat down. The butter beans were still ticking softly on the cooling burner. "What was the sale price?" I asked. $340,000. I nodded. To myself, to the kitchen, to nothing. "Mr. Okafor," I said, "I did not give my son power of attorney. I did not give my son permission to sell that house. That house belonged to my late husband, Walter, and it belongs to me, and I have the deed in a fireproof lockbox in this house right now to prove it." Silence. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said carefully, "that is exactly why I am calling you." I looked at the window. The October light had shifted while we were talking. It wasn't gold anymore. It was the color of rust. "Mr. Okafor," I said, "don't close that deal. Not one signature, not $1. I stood up. "And if you are the kind of attorney I believe you are, the kind who called me before you let this happen, then you already know what I'm about to do," he said. "Yes, ma'am. I believe I do." I thanked him. I hung up the phone. Then I went to the hallway closet, pulled down the fireproof lockbox from the top shelf, set it on the kitchen table, and opened it with the combination only I have ever known. Everything I needed was inside. And I had known, in the way that mothers sometimes know things their hearts are not ready to say out loud, that one day it would come to this. Before I tell you what happened, before I tell you how a boy I held in a hospital in Mobile, Alabama in 1981, a boy I put through school, a boy I watched become a man, before I tell you how that boy looked at my name on a deed to a piece of land his father and I saved for 11 years to buy, and decided that my ownership of it was an obstacle instead of a fact, I need to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so completely that you made yourself vulnerable to them? Not because you were naive, not because you were careless, but because love, real love, requires a kind of openness that can be used against you. And you knew that, and you chose it anyway, because the alternative, closing yourself off, protecting yourself from the people you love most, felt like a different kind of death. Have you ever been there? Because that's where this story lives. Not in the paperwork, not in the real estate. That's just the surface of it. This story lives in the place where a mother's love and a son's desperation met, and only one of them came prepared. If you're sitting with me right now, if this is the kind of story that finds you, please like this video before we go any further. It costs you nothing, and it tells the channel that this kind of story matters. And if you haven't subscribed to Still Waters yet, I want you to hit that button right now. Every week we sit with stories that don't get told loudly enough, and I want to know, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. There is something about knowing you are not sitting alone that steadies the heart. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Dorothy Mae Whitfield. I was born in 1957 in Selma, Alabama, the third of 5 children, in a house that had a screen door that never closed all the way, and a mother who sang gospel every morning before she did a single other thing. My father worked for the county roads department for 31 years. He was not a man of many words, but he was a man who showed up. Every morning, every bill, every crisis, he showed up. I learned what love looked like from watching him. I married Walter Jerome Whitfield in 1979. I was 22 years old, and he was 25, and we were both so certain about each other that we didn't need a long engagement. We knew. Some people spend years trying to figure out what they're looking for. Walter and I just looked at each other and said, "Oh, there you are." We built a life in Montgomery. Walter was a high school principal. I was a CPA, ran my own practice for 28 years. Together we raised 2 children, Marcus, our son, born in 1981, and Renee, our daughter, born in 1984. The beach house came in 1997. Walter had been talking about it for years. Not in a dreaming way, in a planning way. He had a yellow legal pad where he tracked our savings specifically set aside for it. He called it the Gulf Fund, and he updated it every quarter the way I updated my clients' books. Methodical, patient. That was Walter. We found the cottage on Pelican Crest Lane in the spring of 1997. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a porch that faced the Gulf of Mexico and caught the evening breeze in a way that made you believe the world had a kind side. We paid cash, $127,000, which in 1997 was everything we had saved toward it. We put it in a family trust with both our names, with the provision that upon either of our deaths, full ownership transferred to the survivor. Walter died in 2018. Pancreatic cancer. 4 months from diagnosis to the end. He was 61 years old. After that, the beach house became something else to me. It became the place where I could still hear him, the creak of the second porch step, the particular smell of the outdoor shower when the wood got hot in the afternoon, the way the light hit the water at sunrise when you stood at the end of the private dock we'd put in 2003. That house held Walter's footprints, and I was not ready to let go of it. Marcus and Renee both knew this, or I thought they did. Let me tell you about my son. Marcus was a bright child, quick-minded, curious, the kind of boy who took things apart to see how they worked and sometimes could not quite get them back together. He was charming in the way that hides things, the kind of charm that makes people trust you before they've finished the sentence where you introduced yourself. As a child, that quality was endearing. In a 42-year-old man, it is something more complicated. He did well in school, went to Auburn on partial scholarship, got a business degree. He worked in real estate development for a while in the early 2000s, did reasonably well. He got married in 2009, a woman named Brittany, and they had 2 children, Tyler and Keely. I loved those grandchildren with everything I had. I spent 2 weeks at the beach house with them every summer. That was non-negotiable. Those weeks were the best weeks of my year. The problems with Marcus started quietly, the way financial problems usually do. Around 2019, about a year after Walter died, he started calling me more often. Not just to check in, to borrow. 1,000 here, 2,000 there, always with a reason. The business was slow. Brittany's car needed work. The kids' school had an unexpected expense. I gave because he was my son, and I was his mother, and I had the means to help. That is what you do. By 2021, it had become a pattern I did not want to name. By 2022, it had a shape I recognized but refused to look at directly. He had borrowed in total just over $34,000 from me in 3 years. I kept a record, not to use against him, but because I am a CPA and I keep records the way other people breathe. It is not a choice. It is just what I am. In the spring of 2023, Marcus came to visit me in Montgomery. He brought Brittany and the kids, and for 3 days we had a beautiful time, the way you can, when the thing that's wrong between people stays in the corner of the room where no one is looking. On the 3rd evening, after the children were asleep and Brittany had gone to bed, Marcus sat across from me at the kitchen table. He had a beer he wasn't drinking and a look on his face I had seen before. Not on him, but on clients. Clients who had gotten into something they needed help getting out of. "Mama," he said, "I need to talk to you about the beach house." I poured myself a glass of water. I sat back down. "I'm listening," I said. He said he and Brittany were in debt. Not surface debt, deep debt. A real estate venture that had gone sideways. A loan he had co-signed for a business partner that had defaulted. Credit cards that had been used to cover the difference while they waited for things to turn around. He said the number out loud. $218,000. I did not say anything for a long time. "I'm not asking you to give me the money," he said. "I know you don't have that kind of liquid cash." He paused. "But the beach house, Mama, that house is worth 300, maybe 350 now. If we sold it, you'd still walk away with more than enough to—" "Marcus." He stopped. "That house is not for sale," I said. "That house is where your father's memory lives. That house is where your children know their grandfather through the stories I tell them on that porch. It is not an ATM." He didn't argue. Not that night. He said he understood. He said he was sorry for bringing it up. He hugged me before he went to bed. 18 months later, a lawyer called me from Gulf Shores about a purchase agreement. I want to be precise about the timeline here, because precision is how you understand what Marcus actually did. He didn't act on impulse. He didn't make one bad decision in a desperate moment. What he did required planning. It required deception sustained over time. And it required him to look at me, his mother, and calculate that I would not find out until it was too late. He had been wrong about that last part. But I am getting ahead of myself. What I need you to understand, before we go any further, is that when I sat at my kitchen table that October afternoon with the lockbox open in front of me, I was not just a woman whose son had tried to steal from her. I was a woman who had seen this coming and had quietly, carefully, without ever telling a soul, been ready. The document that changed everything came to me not in October, but in June, 4 months before Raymond Okafor called. I want to explain how. In the spring of 2023, after Marcus and his family left from that visit, after that kitchen table conversation about the beach house, I did something I had never done before in 30 years of mothering. I called my estate attorney. Her name is Claudette Frazier. She has an office on Dexter Avenue in Montgomery, 3 blocks from the Capitol. She is 61 years old, and she went to Howard Law, and she is the sharpest person I know who doesn't make a show of it. We have been friends since our children were small. We have sat together through funerals and diagnoses and the ordinary disasters of life. I called Claudette, and I told her what Marcus had said. "I'm probably being paranoid," I said. "You are not being paranoid," she said. "You are being a woman who spent 28 years reading other people's financial situations, and your instincts are probably exactly right. What do you want to do?" "I want to understand what he could do," I said. "If he tried." Claudette was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dot, I need to ask you something. Do you have a power of attorney anywhere? Old, new, for medical purposes, anything that has Marcus's name on it?" I thought. "Walter and I made POAs in 2015, I said, when he got his first health scare. Before we knew it was nothing. I named Marcus as my agent for financial matters if I became incapacitated. Is that document filed anywhere?" "It was filed with the estate documents in 2015, with Raymond Turnbull at Turnbull and Associates." "Raymond Turnbull retired," Claudette said. I knew that. I had known that for 2 years. I had not thought about what happened to his files. "Dot," Claudette said carefully. "If his firm was dissolved and those files weren't transferred properly, or if Marcus had access to them at any point, that old POA might be out there without you knowing it." I sat very still. "What would Marcus need to do?" I said. "To use that document to sell the beach house." Claudette told me. "He would need a certified copy of the power of attorney. He would need to present it to a title company as proof of his authority to act on my behalf. He would need a seller who looked credible, meaning a real estate agent willing to list the property, a title company willing to process the transaction, and a buyer willing to sign. He would need me not to find out until after closing, when the deed had transferred and the money had moved. How likely is it that a title company would process a sale like that without contacting the principal? I asked. More likely than you'd think, she said. Especially if the POA looks legitimate and the seller is confident. They're not investigators, they're processors. Unless, I said, the buyer's attorney decided to do a more thorough title search. Unless that, she agreed. I asked Claudette to do 3 things for me. First, revoke the 2015 power of attorney immediately and file a new one naming Renee, my daughter, as my sole financial agent. Second, have the Whitfield family trust documents reviewed and confirmed. The beach house should be clearly, unambiguously in the trust, with no gaps in the chain of title that a creative reading could exploit. Third, do all of this quietly. No letters to Marcus. No notifications that anything had changed. Just clean it up and document it. You think he's already moving, Claudette said. I think he's thinking about it, I said. And I want to be ready either way. What I did not know in May of 2023 was that Marcus had already moved. He had obtained a certified copy of the 2015 POA in March of 2023, 2 months before he came to visit me with Brittany and the kids, 2 months before he sat at my kitchen table with his beer and his careful look, and suggested we sell the beach house. He had called Turnbull's former firm under the pretense of requesting estate documents for tax purposes, and they had sent him a full copy. I found this out from Claudette in June, when she tracked down the file transfer log from the dissolved firm as part of confirming the trust documents. He has the POA, she told me over the phone. Certified copy, and he used it. She had found the listing. The beach house at 214 Pelican Crest Lane had been quietly listed with a Gulf Shores real estate agency, not the one we had always used, in April of 2023, under Marcus's name, as agent for Dorothy May Whitfield, acting under power of attorney. The listing had been live for 6 weeks before they found a buyer. The Harmon family, a couple from Nashville, looking for a vacation property on the Gulf. They had made an offer in late May. Marcus had accepted. They're under contract, Claudette said. The closing is scheduled for November 15th. I sat with that for a long time. November 15th. That gave me 5 months. 5 months in which Marcus believed everything was proceeding normally. 5 months in which he would continue to believe I had no idea. 5 months for me to prepare. Now let me show you what Marcus was doing during those same 5 months, because you need to understand both sides of what was happening. While I was meeting with Claudette and auditing every document in my fireproof lockbox, Marcus was managing the sale. He was communicating with the listing agent, a man named Greg Sims, who, I would later learn, did not know the full truth of what he was participating in. Marcus told Greg that his mother had health issues and had given him authority to handle the transaction. He was not entirely lying. I had given him a POA for that specific reason in 2015. He was simply omitting the part where that POA had been revoked. Marcus had opened a separate account at a credit union in Auburn, not in Gulf Shores, not in Montgomery, but in Auburn, where he had gone to school and still knew people. He planned to receive the $340,000 there. He planned to use $218,000 to clear his debt. He planned to keep the rest. What he planned to tell me afterward, I do not know exactly. I have thought about it. Probably that he had made a mistake, that the pressure had gotten to him, that he was going to pay me back. People who do things like this always have a version of themselves they're ready to show after the fact, a version that is sorry, that explains the fear and the desperation, that asks you to see the human being inside the wrong. And I am not dismissing that version. Marcus was my son, and his desperation was real, and I understood every single thing that had driven him to this place. Understanding it did not mean I was going to let it happen. In August, I called Renee. Renee is my daughter. She is 39 years old. She lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she works as a hospital administrator. She is organized and unsentimental in the way that second children sometimes become, growing up in the shadow of an older sibling who took up more space. She had suspected something was wrong with Marcus for years before I was ready to say it. I told her everything. She was quiet through most of it. When I finished, she said, "Mama, how long have you known?" "Since June," I said. "And you've been sitting on this since June." "I've been preparing since June," I said. "There's a difference," She flew down to Montgomery in September. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had sat with his careful look and his untouched beer, and we went through everything with Claudette on speakerphone. Every document, every piece of evidence, the revoked POA, the new trust filing, the title discrepancy that Claudette had already flagged with the county recorder. A paper trail so clean and clear that Raymond Okafor, when he called, already knew before I confirmed it. Because that's what had happened. Raymond Okafor was the Harmon family's attorney. He was thorough, the kind of thorough that costs more per hour, but saves disasters. When he ran the title search in October, he found the revocation of the POA filed in June. He found the updated trust documents filed in July. And he found, from the county recorder's office, a notation on the title that a discrepancy had been flagged. He had called me before he called Marcus. That tells you something about Raymond Okafor. The afternoon he called, I was not surprised. I was ready. I had been ready since June, when I first heard the name Harmon and understood that my son had made his move, and I had made mine. And now, we were both waiting for the same moment. The moment was October 9th, at 4:17 in the afternoon. I closed the lockbox. I called Claudette. He's in Gulf Shores, she said. She had already heard from Okafor's office. He drove down this week. He's been staying at the house, Dot. At my house. At the house where Walter died reaching for my hand. I'll be there Saturday, I said. I drove to Gulf Shores on Saturday morning. I left Montgomery at 6:15. The drive is 4.5 hours, south on I-65, through pine country and then flatland, until the air changes and you can smell the Gulf before you see it. I drove with the radio off. I have found, in my 67 years, that silence before a difficult thing prepares you better than noise. Renee had driven down from Charlotte on Friday and was staying at a hotel in Gulf Shores. We had agreed she would not come to the house with me. Not at first. Claudette had also driven down. She was staying at the same hotel as Renee. She had a folder of documents in her briefcase that would, if necessary, be served on Marcus that afternoon. We had decided together. I would speak to my son first, alone. Then, depending on what he said, we would determine the next step. I parked in the shell-paved lot beside the cottage at 10:43 in the morning. Marcus's car, a gray Nissan that I had co-signed for in 2021, a fact that was not lost on me, was in the driveway. The porch light was on, which it shouldn't have been at that hour. The front door was closed. I sat in my car for exactly 2 minutes. Then I got out, walked to the front door and knocked. Nothing for a moment. Then footsteps. The door opened and Marcus stood there in a faded auburn t-shirt and athletic shorts, clearly not expecting me, clearly not having had enough sleep. He looked at my face, and something in him went very still. "Mama," he said, "what are you—" "May I come in?" I said. "It is my house." He stepped back. I walked in. The cottage smelled the same way it always smells. Salt air and wood polish and something faintly sweet I have never been able to identify. Some property of the Gulf light coming through old window frames. The morning sun was hitting the kitchen floor in a stripe the way it does in October, long and low and gold. Marcus closed the door behind me. There were dishes in the sink. A laptop open on the kitchen table. A real estate agency's folder on the counter. Greg Sims's name on the tab. I did not look at those things. I looked at my son. He was 42 years old, and he looked older. He had lost weight since the spring. His eyes had a quality I recognized. The quality of someone who has been carrying something heavy for too long. "Sit down, Marcus," I said. He sat at the kitchen table. I sat across from him. "I want to give you the chance to tell me the truth," I said. "Everything. From the beginning. Before we talk about anything else." He looked at the table. He looked at his hands. He looked up at me. "How much do you know?" he said. "All of it," I said. "But I want to hear it from you." A long silence. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a seagull called once and then went quiet. "Mama," he said. And then his voice broke. Not dramatically, not in a show. It broke the way a thing breaks that has been under pressure for too long. A small, quiet fracture. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to—" "Start from the beginning," I said. My voice was level. When did you get the copy of the POA? He looked at me. March of last year, he said. How? I called Turnbull's old firm. I said I needed it for tax records. They sent it. He paused. I wasn't sure I was going to use it. I told myself I was just keeping options open. And when did you decide to use it? After the visit. After you said no. His voice was quiet. We were going to lose the house, Mama. Our house in Birmingham. Brittany, she didn't know how bad it was. I had been hiding it from her. And when I got home after seeing you, I sat in the car in my driveway for an hour because I didn't know what else to do. So you decided to sell my house. I decided to. I told myself it was a loan. That I would tell you after. That I would pay you back. Marcus. I leaned forward just slightly. $340,000. You were going to take $340,000 from me and call it a loan you intended to repay. He had the decency not to answer that. Did Greg Sims know what he was participating in? I asked. No. I told him you were unwell and had given me authority. He asked to see the POA. I showed him. He moved forward. And the title company? Same story. Same document. He put his face in his hands. They didn't question it, Mama. It looked legitimate. Because it was legitimate once. It was revoked in June, I said. He lifted his head. His expression changed. I revoked the power of attorney in June, I said, after you visited, after that conversation. I filed new trust documents in July, and I flagged the title with the county recorder's office, which is why, when the buyer's attorney ran his title search, he found the discrepancy and called me. Marcus stared at me. You knew, he said. Not an accusation. A slow comprehension, spreading across his face like water across a flat surface. You knew before October. I knew in June, and you didn't. He stopped. You waited. I prepared, I said. The kitchen was very quiet. The Harmon family, I said. Are they good people? He blinked at the shift. Yes, I think so. They have 2 kids. They were excited about the house. Then I'm sorry they were pulled into this. I folded my hands on the table. They are not going to lose their deposit. Claudette's office has already been in contact with Raymond Okafor. We will make sure they are made whole. With what money? His voice was barely above a whisper. With yours, I said. That's part of what happens next. He sat back in his chair. He looked like a man who had run a long way and just stopped. What happens next? He said. That depends on you, I said. I'm going to ask you some questions and I need honest answers. Not performance, not apologies designed to get me to soften. Honest answers. He nodded. Is Brittany aware of any of this? No. Does she know the full extent of the financial situation? She knows it's bad. She doesn't know exactly how bad. Tyler and Keely, they're okay? School, health, all of that? He looked at me with something that I can only describe as gratitude for the question. They're fine. They don't know anything. Good. I took a breath. Then here is what Claudette has prepared and what you're going to do. I had thought about this moment for 4 months. What I was going to say. What I was going to ask for. What was punitive and what was necessary and what was neither. Just real. You're going to sign a promissory note, I said. For $34,000. The money you have borrowed from me since 2019. Not a gift. A loan with a formalized repayment schedule. Claudette has the document. He was nodding slowly. You're going to fully disclose your financial situation to Brittany. Not a version of it. All of it. This week. A sharp intake of breath. Mama, Marcus. My voice did not rise. She is your wife. She has been living in a story you made up about your finances for years. She deserves the truth about her own life. He pressed his lips together, and then, after a moment, nodded. You're going to make a full written statement to Claudette about the circumstances of how you obtained and used the 2015 power of attorney. Not to be filed anywhere unless necessary, but documented. Mama, if that ever became public, it won't become public unless you give me reason to make it public. I held his gaze. But I'm not going to sit in a room with my son who has done what you have done without having something that makes it real. Something that says, "This happened. I did this to my mother. It needs to exist." He looked at the table for a long time. "And the house?" he said finally. "The house stays in the trust," I said, "as it has always been. It will go to you and Renee when I die, as we always planned. You will still bring your children here in the summer. That has not changed." I paused. "Because I am not punishing them for what you did." He looked up at me. There were tears on his face. Not dramatic tears. The quiet kind. The kind that come when a man looks at what he has done in the full light and can't look away from it. "Why?" he said. His voice was rough. "Why aren't you? Mama, you should be screaming at me. You should be done with me. Why?" "Because you are my son," I said. "And because what you did came from fear and desperation and a bad decision that grew into a worse one. And I understand every step of how you got there, even while I refuse to accept any of it." I looked at him steadily. "And because your father loved you. And I have no intention of managing this in a way that Walter would not recognize." That was the moment that broke him. Not anger, not threat. The mention of his father. He put his hands over his face and wept. Quietly. Completely. I waited. After a while, I stood up. I put my hand on the top of his head the way I had when he was small, when he was Tyler's age, when the biggest problems in his world were problems I could fix with a glass of orange juice and 10 minutes of attention. I could not fix this with that. But I could stand here. So I did. At 12:30 in the afternoon, I called Claudette. She and Renee came to the cottage. Renee walked in and looked at her brother. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You scared me, Marcus. You really scared me." He said, "I know. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough." She knew it wasn't enough. He knew it wasn't enough. But it was a start. Claudette spread the documents on the kitchen table. The promissory note, the disclosure statement, the formal withdrawal of the sale agreement. Marcus read every word. He asked 2 questions, both practical, both appropriate. Claudette answered them. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Marcus signed the promissory note. At 2:24, he signed the disclosure statement. At 3:05, Claudette called Raymond Okafor's office and formally notified them that the sale was voided, that the seller had no valid authority, and that the Harmon family's deposit would be returned in full with an additional amount for their inconvenience. The source of those funds, per the agreement Marcus had signed, was a home equity line from his property in Birmingham. When Claudette hung up the phone, the kitchen was very quiet. Greg Sims, the listing agent, received a certified letter the following Monday explaining the situation and formally withdrawing the listing. He would later tell Claudette that he had had questions about the transaction, but had not pursued them. He was not charged with anything. He spent 2 weeks, from what I heard, feeling very uncomfortable about that. The Harmon family received their deposit back plus $8,000 for expenses and inconvenience within 10 days. I was told by Raymond Okafor that Mrs. Harmon cried on the phone when she found out. From relief, not anger. They had fallen in love with the cottage. I told Okafor to tell them, "Some houses are not for sale, because they are held for other purposes. I hope they found one just as beautiful." I believe they did. The weeks after the confrontation had a strange texture to them. Not triumphant, not resolved, just heavy, the way the air gets before rain. On the Sunday after the signing, Marcus called Brittany from the beach house. I was not in the room. I sat on the porch with my second cup of coffee and listened to the Gulf and let them have that conversation in private. It lasted 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, not to monitor, but because I could feel the weight of it in the salt air, and I needed to stay present. When Marcus came out to the porch, he had been crying again. His face had the look of someone who has put down a very heavy thing and is not sure whether to feel relieved or ashamed of how long they were carrying it. "She wants to come down," he said. "Then call her back and tell her yes," I said. Brittany drove down that night. She arrived after 10 o'clock, when the beach was dark and the sound of the waves was the only thing. She stood in the doorway of the cottage and looked at me, just for a moment, with an expression I understood completely. She was embarrassed. She was horrified. She was trying to figure out how to stand in a room with a woman her husband had wronged. "Brittany," I said. "Come in. Are you hungry?" She sat at the kitchen table, and I heated up the soup I had made that afternoon, and I watched her eat. And then she put her hands over her face and said, "Dorothy, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "I know," I said, "and I'm not asking you to carry his choices. Those belong to him." She looked at me with the particular exhaustion of a woman who has been managing an incomplete version of reality for years and has just been handed the complete one. "What do we do now?" she said. "You go home," I said. "You talk to a financial counselor. A real one. Not a friend who knows about money, a licensed one. You make a plan that you both see clearly, and you come back to this house in the summer with my grandchildren, because that has not changed." She cried then. Not the same way Marcus had cried. Differently, with relief in it. I want to be honest about this. What Marcus did not leave me unchanged. I want you to understand that. I sat in that cottage that first night after everyone had gone to their hotel, and I felt the full weight of it. Not just the violation of the financial act, but the thing underneath it. That my son had looked at me and calculated, had treated my trust as a resource to be extracted, had decided that managing me around the truth was easier than asking for help. That part I had to sit with alone. I called my friend Josephine Baker, not the famous one, but my Josephine, who has been my closest friend since 1991, and who will say the thing I need to hear when I need to hear it. I told her everything. "How are you?" she said. Not "how did it go?" "How are you?" "I'm all right," I said. "I'm sad. I'm steady. Both at once." "That sounds about right," she said. "I keep thinking about the moment when he asked why I wasn't screaming at him," I said, "and I didn't have a simple answer for him then, but I've been thinking about it." "What's your answer?" "Because screaming would have been for me," I said, and I was trying to do something that lasted. Josephine was quiet. "Then, Walter would have handled it exactly the same way." I pressed my lips together. "Don't make me cry, Joe." "Too late," she said. "Too late. The promissory note is real. Marcus has been making monthly payments, small ones, the amount we agreed on, for 6 months now. He has not missed one. That matters to me less as money than as proof. Proof that he understood what it meant to sign it. Proof that he is trying to be a man who honors what he puts his name to. He and Brittany are in financial counseling. The Birmingham house is not lost. It is mortgaged more heavily than it should be, and they have a long road. But they have a road. I changed the locks at the beach house. I want you to know that. I mention it because it would be easy for me to tell this story in a way where I am only the patient, dignified woman who handled everything with grace, and leave out the parts where I acted from something harder than grace. I changed the locks, and I put a new alarm system in, and I called Claudette and made sure every document related to that property was so thoroughly filed and recorded that a toddler doing a title search would find it. That was not forgiveness. That was not punishment either. That was just Dorothy Mae Whitfield protecting what is hers. December came. I drove back down to Gulf Shores on a Thursday, the second week of the month, alone. Not for any particular reason. Just because I wanted to. The Gulf in December is a different animal than the Gulf in summer. Quieter. The tourist traffic gone. The light low and silver. The beach nearly empty except for the occasional pair of retirees with their walking shoes and their matching windbreakers, heading into the wind like they mean it. I sat on the porch of the cottage in my heaviest cardigan, not the burgundy one I wear at home, but a thick navy one Walter gave me for Christmas in 2011, and I had a cup of tea, and I watched the water. There is a quality to the Gulf in December that I have never heard anyone describe correctly. It is not peaceful exactly. It is too big and too gray and too restless for peace. It is something closer to honest, like it has stopped performing for anyone, and is just being what it is. I thought about Walter. I thought about the two of us standing on this porch in 1997 with our coffee cups, and the deed in Walter's jacket pocket, looking at the water and saying very little because there was very little to say. We had done it. After 11 years of that yellow legal pad and those quarterly updates. We had done it. I thought about Marcus as a child, running across this beach with sand dollars he held up to show me like they were treasure, which they were. I thought about Keely and Tyler, who would be here in June, who would run across the same stretch of sand and hold up the same kinds of things. My phone rang. It was Renee. "Are you at the house?" she said. "On the porch," I said. "Cold?" "Honest," I said. A pause. "I've been thinking about what you said. That you were sad and steady at the same time." "Yes, I'm still angry at him," she said. "I want you to know that. I'm not where you are. You don't have to be where I am," I said. "You're his sister, not his mother. Those are different jobs. He called me this week," she said. "He said he was sorry. Not just for the house, for all of it. For the years of borrowing and the years of managing around the truth and—" She stopped. He sounded different. Tired, but different. "I know," I said. "Are you going to be okay, Mama?" I looked at the water. A pelican was riding a draft far out over the waves, not even moving its wings, just existing in the current of the air. "I am going to be more than okay," I said. "I am going to sit on this porch in the summer with your brother's children, and they are going to show me sand dollars, and I am going to hold them like treasure." I paused. "Because they are." Renee was quiet for a moment. "I'm coming down for New Year's," she said. "If that's okay." "That is more than okay," I said. "Bring whoever you want. I'll make Walter's gumbo." After we hung up, I sat for a long time in the silence. The victory was not that I had stopped the sale. The victory was not that Marcus had signed the documents or made the payments or was in financial counseling. Those things were important. They were real. But they were not the victory. The victory was this porch, this cup of tea, this water doing what water does in December, being honest, being restless, being exactly itself. The victory was that $340,000 could not buy what this house held. And I had known that. And I had been right. There is something I want to tell you about documentation. I know that sounds dry. I know that when you hear the word documentation, you think of paperwork and filing cabinets and the kind of bureaucratic tedium that makes ordinary life feel like a legal proceeding. But I want to tell you what documentation actually is, from the point of view of a woman who spent 28 years as a CPA and who sat across from enough desperate people to understand what happens when records are not kept. Documentation is memory with witnesses. That is all it is. It is the act of saying, "This happened, and I have proof, and that proof exists outside of my word against yours." It is the most powerful tool that ordinary people have against anyone. Institution, family member, employer, anyone, who is counting on the fact that you won't be able to prove what you know to be true. My son counted on that. He counted on the gap between what he knew I knew and what I could prove I knew. He built an entire plan around that gap. I closed the gap before he could step through it. And I want to say something to you about love and documentation together, because I know those words don't naturally sit next to each other. And I know that the act of protecting yourself against someone you love can feel like a betrayal of the love itself, like it means you don't trust them, like it means you're preparing for war instead of building peace. I do not see it that way. Documenting your life, your ownership, your agreements, your loans, your assets, your wishes, is not preparation for war. It is an act of care. It is the thing that prevents misunderstandings from becoming catastrophes. It is the thing that protects the people who come after you from ambiguity and conflict and grief on top of grief. It is, if I am being very direct with you, one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and for everyone who will ever need to know what was true. Keep your records. Update your estate documents. Know who has your power of attorney and why. Do not let old paperwork sit in dissolved firms and forgotten files and become someone else's opportunity. And if you have children, or siblings, or partners, or parents, or anyone in your life who is struggling with money in a way that makes you uneasy, trust that unease. Not with anger, not with accusation, but with preparation. With a quiet conversation with a trusted attorney, with a review of your documents, with the kind of low-key, undramatic caution that Walter used to call loving yourself enough to be careful. I lost nothing. I want to say that again because I need you to hear it. I lost nothing. Not the house. not the memory, not the relationship with my son, though that relationship is changed now. Not broken, but changed. The way things that have been tested and survived are always changed. Not my grandchildren's summers, not Walter's footprints on that porch. I kept it all. Not because I was lucky, because I was ready. If there is someone in your life who is watching your assets a little too closely, if there is a conversation you have been avoiding because you are afraid of what it will reveal, if there is a document somewhere that needs to be updated and you have been putting it off, please, do it this week. Not because the worst will happen, but because the best protection against the worst is a quiet afternoon and a good attorney and the willingness to take care of yourself. You deserve to take care of yourself. Now I want to know, where are you watching from right now? What time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Tell me about a moment when documentation, records, proof, paperwork, protected you or someone you love. Or tell me about a time it should have and didn't. I want to hear from you. If this story stayed with you, please like this video and subscribe to Still Waters. We are building something here, a place for the stories that are told quietly, that survive not because they were loud, but because they were real. And thank you. Thank you for sitting with me in this one. Still waters run deep. Thank you for sitting with me in them.